Welcome to Iron Summit, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of becoming your best self, blending expert insights on strength training, smart recovery, optimal nutrition, and mindset mastery to help you elevate your game.
What's up, guys? If you're looking to level up your training, click the link in the description and check out the Iron Summit Gains Emporium. Our strength training plans are designed to help you pack on muscle, and with our software, you can track every workout right from your phone. Plus, you'll have direct access to us for any questions along the way. Don't just train, level up your training.
All right, we're live. We got Ben Cherrington today. He was an undefeated Division I NCAA wrestling champion at 157 pounds, the best weight class. Max has had too many heavyweights on this podcast, so we need more 57-pounders. And then you coach college wrestling at UNC, and then now you're an MMA coach for a bunch of top UFC and MMA athletes, as well as, real estate and all the other businesses that you do on the side. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on, fellas.
Awesome.
Of course. Well, we've known, both Brian and I have known Ben for a while, so this is good to have you on.
Yeah,
Colorado legend.
You guys were both young pups when I came back to the state. So.
Sure.
How did you first get into wrestling, Ben?
I got in. I guess I wrestled my first match at 4 years old. My dad was the coach up here, junior high and high school coach. Ran a little youth club called Wild West Wrestling, and I was just around it from the day I was born. Pretty much, I was in the room, and the guys that I was around every day were like big brothers to me. So I didn't know anything different. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's such a cool way to grow up. But like some kids, it pushes them away, and some kids they lean in like you, and just end up animals in the sport.
yeah, man, it was fun. I couldn't picture myself doing anything else. Never really had interest in anything else. So
You were from Granby growing up, right?
yeah.
Well, were you guys 3A?
Yeah.
2A?
3A.
Did you get to beat up any of the bigger school division?
We did.
kids anytime?
We had a good team, man. We especially my junior senior year, we had a tough team. We went to the Warrior Classic, and my senior year, we actually, up until the finals, we were winning the Warrior Classic, the big school and the small school division. And then we wrestled in the Lincoln Invite, which back in the day, the Lincoln Invite was super tough tournament. Pomona, Thompson Valley, a bunch of top schools were there. So yeah, we had lots of opportunity. My senior year, I wrestled the 2A, 4A, and 5A state champs at some point during the year.
I'm guessing you beat them all.
I did. Yep.
Yeah. I always I like when the small school kids beat up the big school kids. Like Ryan and I, us soft big school town kids.
Yeah.
That's funny. What made you ultimately choose Boise State? Such a sweet program. I'm super sad that the wrestling team got dropped. But how'd you decide to go out there, and what other schools were you looking at?
Yeah, it was, just the recruiting process, right? They were one of the schools that reached out. I had actually talked to Coach Owens. He was the assistant at the time out in Fargo, my junior year. And that was my first connection with them. I was looking at Lehigh, Nebraska. Nebraska was where I really wanted to go. We went to team camp there every year. I kind of just fell in love with that place a little bit. And that was, I guess, my first year in there would have been, or my senior year was Manning's first year, and that's when Terry Brands was there, and a handful of other guys. So they had a good staff. But like anything, you don't know until you know, right? You go on the visits, and I used to tell my guys and the recruits that I bring in, you're going to have a gut feeling when you go to a campus, go to university, and it's important you follow your gut, and that was kind of what I did. And it was actually Terry Brands was who gave me that advice in Nebraska. He said, I'd love you to come here, but if it's not the right place, it's not the right place. You're not going to be successful. And, went to Boise and fell in love with campus, had just connected with the guys really well, connected with the coaches, and the rest is history. So
That's awesome. Yeah, your gut told you don't go to Lehigh.
Yeah, right. And my ACT score, one of the two. So.
Yeah, that's funny.
I had my mic muted and I was talking. Did you take a visit to Lehigh?
No, I didn't. I did not take a visit to Lehigh. Strobel came out and did a home visit with me, and everything went good. Just honestly, I didn't really have the test scores to pursue it too far.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's but I out of all the places, because Boise still had a program while I was wrestling in college,
Yep.
that was like or up until my senior year,
Mhm.
that was like my favorite place to go wrestle. It
Yeah.
was like, I love Boise.
Yeah, Boise's an amazing city, man. It's been discovered, but when I was there, it was still kind of under the radar. And it's like Fort Collins, but nicer.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people call it like a small Denver too, almost. That's cool. It's a cool area. So
Yeah.
Ben, like you obviously had a really successful college career, but never All American until your senior year, and you go from, getting real close to All Americaning, and then you go undefeated season, national champ. What was that big change? I mean, that's a crazy jump. I'm thinking of Matt Gentry might have been the only other person that I know of that kind of did a similar type track. What was the big difference between junior year, senior year? Because that's I guess just not a traditional jump.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, I had a tough freshman year. I was undersized at 157. We had a quality 149 pounder who was a 2-time All American, and I'd wrestle him pretty even in the room, but ultimately, in terms of strength of lineup, it made more sense for me to be at 57s, and I just had a tough season. I think I was like 500. I beat some good guys, but lost to a lot of tough guys, and I think I think from a confidence standpoint, I was damaged a little bit after that season, and you have. I'm sure you guys went through it at some point in your college careers when it's just like you feel like your back's against the wall every day. You walk in there and
Oh yeah.
you question why you're there. You question if it's the right thing. And, I went through a couple years of that, I think. And then my junior year went down to 49s. And, if the national tournament would have been in December, I think that would have been an amazing weight for me. But, the weight cut got to be pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the year, it got to be the focus, right? The wrestling was secondary to making weight. And, and I weighed in every single competition. I didn't take a single weekend off. And I think that took a toll on me. It came up short that year, ended up in the round of 12. Obviously sucks going into your senior year, knowing that that's it. And then, but the weight cut to 49s, I think ultimately is what made me a good size 57 pounder. I think my body reacted in a way it grew, and I was weighing 180 pounds going into my senior year, which was
Wow.
it
That's
was actually
big.
a conversation. Do we go 65s or do we go 57s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of either or. Ended up getting hurt. During preseason my senior year, and had to have a pretty substantial knee surgery in October that year, and really didn't know if I was going to have a season at all. But didn't qualify for a medical red shirt, because I'd used my red shirt just traditionally like a lot of guys do. So we didn't feel like that was an option. So I just had to work through it, right? Lots of Aerodyne, lots of getting my knee drained on a weekly basis, cortisone shots, things like that. And came back, I guess January 4th was my first match back that year. And, I think it was a combo of I was a little bit rested because I hadn't wrestled the early part of the season. Didn't go to Vegas. Some of those grinder tournaments that can take it out of you early. And it was just I had a mindset of I have nothing to lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like this injury is pretty substantial. I'm wrestling through a lot of things. Nobody really expects anything now, and it was just kind of a freeing feeling, And that year I also was fortunate enough that the coaching staff brought Kirk White back in. White was returning. He was a national champ at Boise State, and at the time I think he was second or third on the Olympic ladder behind Joe Williams. That was like the only guy that could could get the better of him, So
Yep.
that was a guy I got to work out with every day. He was really the only guy in the room that could push me and challenge me. And, and by the end of the season, I was wrestling even with him, wrestling even with one of the best guys in the world. And, kind of whoever has the better day was winning the day. And so I went into the Pac-10s and the national tournament with, really just a lot of confidence and really, of the mindset that the only way somebody's going to beat me if they were just straight out better than me, and I didn't think anybody was. So it was just it was a place I had never really been in my career, mentally, physically, I was feeling really good, and ended up rolling, so it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's such a cool story, especially getting injured. I didn't realize that you were injured. I do think like wrestling seasons, especially like a college season, it would be so good for athletes if we did like January to April or something like that. Like it's just so long on your
It's
body.
so long.
Everybody's so banged up.
I think you're seeing it now. I think you're seeing people get wiser to, when you weigh in every single weekend, multiple times a week from December to March. I mean, that takes a toll on somebody. And then you factor in the daily grind of practice, the travel.
Yeah.
It just is, it's a lot, right? And we're seeing match counts go way down. You're seeing people be smarter about it, and I think the rules allow for it now, allowing kids to wrestle a handful of matches and still maintain a red shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal, whereas it was just pretty black and white back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think it took so long for coaching staffs to like pick up on this?
I think
14 matches is way better than 40.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Max. Really, I think
I think about this all the time. I'm like, man, even my senior year, I wrestled like 35 matches.
Yep.
I got a theory for you, Max.
All right,
when you don't have depth on a team, coaches are under pressure to win duels, man. And like you don't want to lose those close duels by sitting your best guys. And you sit one or two guys and you're like barely squeaking out a duel with them in it, you're not winning those duels. I mean, I don't know.
But even duels,
that's absolutely a factor. I mean, that was Boise State's problem. We were underfunded and we had 10 solid guys, but under those 10 guys, there wasn't much, And
a duel, it's a big thing from a weigh-in perspective because you have to weigh in for one match, but it's only one match. So you look at like Penn State, they're wrestling all the big duels with their studs, but that's all they're doing. They're not like no one wrestles tournaments, or a lot of the good programs are not wrestling tournaments where you're getting 6-7 matches in a weekend anymore.
I kind of agree, but it's such a different feel. Like a duel,
I agree.
Like you're almost better wrestling. You got to be careful how many matches you're wrestling, but the tournaments get you prepared because if you're only wrestling duels, your body's not ready for 3-4 matches in a day, and then you tweak something at Big Tens and you're screwed at nationals. Like
I want to agree with you in theory, but Penn State's proven it wrong. Like they don't.
They're an anomaly in a lot of ways, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's been a mindset shift, and I think Penn State, the culture that Penn State's kind of put out there and has been developed over the last 10 years I think it's changed the culture of wrestling across the board from youth up through the international level. I think the old Iowa mindset of winning is everything and
grind,
a lot of pressure on themselves to win, and if you weren't winning, it wasn't fun. I think that mindset is out the window, and these Penn State guys have shown that you can have fun. You don't have to be afraid of losing, and you just are ready to compete at all times. I think that's kind of the mindset we're seeing from the youth level up now, and those things you mentioned, Ryan, like competing in tournaments, to get used to competing in tournaments versus dual meets. I don't know that that's as much of a factor now, because I think these guys are just like, they just love to compete. Like they truly love to get out and compete and put it on the line, and it doesn't matter the situation.
Yeah. Well, I think too, that's a good point. I think also they have such a deep room. They're getting, competition every practice. If you got four matches of killers every practice, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. No, they're unique for sure, and not every program has that. I mean, most programs don't have that situation, but
Yeah.
but I think a lot of people are following suit and trying to model their programs after. Even though Kale's secretive as I'll get out, and you don't really know what's going on in there. You
The
just see
black
the
box.
joy. You see the joy that these kids have on their faces when they're wrestling. And it seems genuine.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and they all have the same
Yeah.
mindset, talk tracks.
Yep.
They're like, there's definitely something going on there that they're doing it right.
Yeah.
For sure. But
I
there's
think-
also, you recruit, you do really well and then you recruit. Like it's easy to get all the best kids too. So it's like, what percentage of those kids would be great at any other school too? Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of variables.
Did you see at the U20 World Team, which is a lot of recruits or young recruits, every other weight is Penn State.
Yeah, they have half the weights. Yeah.
Literally half the weights.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're going to have a good team. It doesn't matter what your mindset is.
Yep.
Like, if you bring those guys in, you're going to have a good team.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just a different time in wrestling, I think, in general. And we're seeing a complete shift in how people think about it and approach it.
How about NIL? Are you glad you're not coaching with that going on?
I'm still looking for
what's your
my
take?
reparations.
Yeah.
There's a lawsuit going on.
No, yeah, I am glad that I'm not having to deal with that. I think if you're at a big university that has amazing resources, it's probably amazing in this era. But if you're at a small university, it just has to be so tough.
Yeah.
You almost have to be of the mindset that we're going to get some blue chippers, knowing we're going to lose them in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of got to be your philosophy.
Yeah.
Not
Why
fun.
would you? Yeah. We talk about it all the time, but if you are one of those big programs, like, why recruit high school kids?
Yeah. Just sit in the porter all day. And
yeah.
So, Ben, not to get too far off NIL, but I just want to circle back to the mindset piece, because I think it's such a big point in wrestling is, I don't know, we always talk about it being like, I don't know, it's 80% mental, 90% mental, but we just train physically all the time, and not many people spend time on mindset. And the only coach I really had ever talked to me about, not really had, but the one coach that I really remember talking to me about that was Mike McMullen. And he's like, you just start stacking these little things. Like you place at this tournament when you didn't think you were gonna, and then you place at this tournament, and then you beat this guy. And those little wins start stacking like confidence chips in your favor. And then you believe it, and then you can actually go do it. And yeah, you're getting better at wrestling as this stuff goes on. But I've definitely had times where, was down with wrestling and just like crappy attitude, and I'd lose to guys that I'd never scored points on me, and then the second I was back to that, like, no, nobody can touch me confidence, it was different. And it's like nothing changed but your mindset. So and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but like, can you dig deeper into what really changed when you flip that switch where it's like, hey, I got no pressure here, I'm hurt, but I'm going to go out here and I'm going to go do this thing? Because getting an undefeated national champ season is insane. And doing it off of, half a year of wrestling to get your timing down and not being 100% is just crazy.
Yeah. So one of the biggest factors that I attribute my mindset to was the people I was around on a daily basis. I had amazing roommates, amazing teammates, but that senior year I had some, I had a house up there and I had people, that would pay rent. But I had some roommates move in with girlfriends, and some new ones move in. One of them was our heavyweight. He was actually graduated at the time, Bo Rushton. He was third in the country one year. Tough Idaho kid. And then Tommy Owen, who was at Minnesota. He was high school national champ, highly recruited coming out. Same year as me, ended up at Minnesota. And he was at Minnesota for 3 years, when they had guys like Luke Becker and, just a laundry list of tough dudes up there. So he got to see the highest level, right? He got to be in the room with a lot of guys who were winning national titles or, getting on the podium. And when he moved into the house, we hit it off right away. But, really it was when he was in the room with me and, he worked out with me a handful of times, he'd come home and be like, I don't know why the hell you haven't won 2 of these already. He was just like you're the best guy I've ever seen on the wrestling mat. And, coming from a guy who'd been around, a Luke Becker, a guy who had beat the crap out of me my freshman year at the NCAA tournament. Guys that I looked up to and wanted to be like, to hear a guy that been in the room with them is telling me that I was far better, and there was no reason that I wasn't winning that tournament. That was huge for me, from a confidence standpoint. And then, then having Kirk in the room and him telling me kind of the same stuff, he's wrestling the best guys in the world, and and he's putting stuff in my brain, and then my coaches were just, they believed in me, like I can't believe. And that was probably it. Just kind of everything kind of came together for me to just develop this supreme confidence that year.
Mhm.
And because I knew they were telling me the truth, I believed them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. They saw something that's like a good, sorry, Max. That's
No,
like a
you go
good
ahead.
coaching like philosophy too. I definitely think, I don't know, I've just seen the guys that really encourage their guys in the corners. I just
Yep.
feel like their guys just wrestle so much harder.
Yep.
Because you can feel the genuine, like when your coach genuinely is like, you're so much better than this, and like behind you 100% and would do anything for you.
Yep.
I had a guy like Andrew Howe in my corner, and
Yeah.
him coming in at 6 a.m. to drill with me before I'd go to class. I'm like, how am I supposed to lose when this guy's sacrificing all this stuff and like
Yeah.
putting all this effort into me and like believing in me and helping you with everything. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool, around some good people.
Yeah.
At Iron Summit, we are about getting everything we can out of our workouts and everyday lives. If you aren't wearing a pair of barefoot or wide toe box trainers, you are leaving gains on the table. The Sashi Athletics Ronin Ichi Minimalist Trainer is a perfect barefoot shoe. Not only does it perform like other major brands on the market, it is actually good looking. Even my wife says so. Get a pair today for 10% off with the code IronSummit10. Link is in the bio. No, because, and you talked about the injury you had, and we've talked about it a little bit before, but you had to make some pretty big technical changes as well to kind of accommodate your knee injury. Like, talk us through that. Did you think it helped by the end of the season once you picked it all up? Like, because I know you were known for like your front headlocks, beating guys up in that position. Do you think hurting your knee made you get better at that?
Yeah. I think that's a huge, probably the biggest part, other than just the stuff I've already mentioned, was it forced me out of my comfort zone, forced me to have to completely change my approach. And it was really developing a hand fight. That was something that I wasn't great at early in my career. Learn getting guys out of position, controlling the head, creating angles. I was a very active, always wanted to be on your legs type guy, but I struggled with guys who held good position, like a Luke Becker. Just solid, strong guys who held good position. I had trouble getting in on them and scoring. So that was one of the big emphasis during the injury, because I couldn't take a shot. I couldn't do much. So Kirk and I just worked on hand fighting and the intricacies of hand fighting, and learning how to just completely control a guy. When I do clinics now, I use the term, kind of the reference to, you put a halter on a broke horse, you can lead the horse wherever you want. Right.
Yep.
And that was sort of what I developed, the ability to control a guy's head, move him, and create openings and really do whatever I wanted to him, and I do really when I realized that I was very effective with it was when I wrestled Joe Johnston in the duel at Iowa. It was like 2 weeks before the Pac-10 tournament in Carver Hawkeye. Joe Johnston's one of the, at the time, one of the best hand fighters, one of the most physically tough wrestlers, returning national finalist. And after the first period, I was up on him 10-0, and
Let's go.
dominating him. And it was completely due to this hand fight that I had developed, and this confidence in, just controlling a guy's head and creating openings and not being open, not worrying about giving my legs up and, and things like that, so, it was a style that I had never wrestled before, but I picked it up really, really well. And, and I think that was ultimately what made the difference when I was on the mat, was
Yeah.
I just didn't worry about guys getting to me. I maybe got taken down 5 times that whole season out of 20 matches. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think hand fighting is one of the biggest differences between high school and college wrestling. And if you can get really good at it,
Yep.
it's like it can be the game itself.
Yeah. I mean, I look at a guy like Jordan Burroughs, who early in Jordan's career, he was not a hand fighter. Everything was from the outside, and he struggled with guys who would get to his head. I coached Adam Hall against him a couple times, and that's how we beat him twice. It was because we'd get to his head. And it was actually the first time he wrestled Andrew Howe in the Midlands finals. I was like, Andrew Howe, smash him. And then that didn't happen. I was like, well, Burroughs figured out how to hand fight, and then it was a huge problem. So,
huge problem
yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah.
What did your training look like in college? Because obviously you were jacked, you were a brute, like hand fighting wise. What were you doing, and how were you staying strong? Well, having to cut a bunch. We talked a little about your 49 season when you're probably cutting a little too much, but how'd you keep muscle mass on and stay healthy with that?
We had a solid weightlifting program. I think we went through 2 or 3 strength coaches during my time there. All of them were good in their own way. I was fortunate. I had an amazing base coming out of high school. My dad was my strength coach and PE teacher at the
CrossFit world champ, right?
Yeah, that's right, Masters champ.
Let's go.
Beast.
But I had we did a ton of Olympic lifting. I was probably the only guy on my college team coming in that knew how to Olympic lift, and I was super proficient with it. And I was strong then. So, anything I did on top of that in the weight room was, just a bonus. But yeah, it was just, every program, some colleges have their weightlifting guy as the football guy, right? And they just kind of adapt the football program to wrestling. We were fortunate, especially my last 2 years. We had a guy who really worked hard at figuring out how to train wrestlers. He was a football guy, but he fell in love with our sport and, created I would say, just because it's popular now, it was sort of like a CrossFit based training program that still had a lot of heavy Olympic lifting in it. And, and I noticed a lot of gains during those last 2 years, just in functional strength, being able to move weight with a high heart rate and, and still be strong.
Yeah.
For sure.
Did you take your nutrition pretty seriously too? Or is that something you learned like throughout college? I think, I don't know about Max, but I, definitely beginning that my college career looked a lot different than by the end of it.
Oh, me too, for sure.
Yeah, I would say overall, I took it pretty serious. Nutrition and just the access to all the information wasn't like it is today.
Uh-huh.
It was, you really had to seek it out, get online, research stuff. It wasn't popping up in your Instagram feed every time you jumped on there,
Yeah.
like it is now. So it wasn't probably a focus like it is now with athletes. We had a general knowledge of it. We didn't have a nutritionist, like some of these programs have now. It was kind of like just go at it by yourself and figure it out. And some guys did a better job than others, but yeah, I just like the weightlifting in high school with my dad, my mom was very health conscious, and I learned good habits from her, with my diet. So yeah, it was a focus, but not near like it is today. I wish I would have had all the information at my fingertips like you do today, and really the supplements, all these things that people take now. Like I didn't do any of that. I've never taken a supplement longer than a few weeks in my whole life. It was just food,
Yep. Yeah. No, it's been a huge shift.
Yeah.
In that. But how about changing topics a little bit? You coach some of the best UFC guys in the US. I mean, you've coached Gaethje since college.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference in coaching MMA versus wrestling? And like with Gaethje, particularly because you've coached him in both.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, what are some of the big differences you notice? How do you approach each?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference, and I'll just say coaching college wrestling, right? Because that was, that's a whole thing on its own. The difference in coaching like college wrestlers, and granted, this doesn't go towards every college wrestler that I coach, but The MMA guys are there because they want to be there. You know, they're trying to make it their livelihood. They're trying to earn money. They're trying to, win belts, and it's completely their own choice to be there. You know,
Yep.
whereas a lot of times the college athletes felt like it didn't matter if you were giving them a book scholarship or they were on a full ride. It seemed like a lot of them felt like you still owed them something,
Mm.
and it was like pulling teeth sometimes to get them to come in, where and there wasn't a lot of gratitude.
Mhm.
You had individuals on the team that were very thankful, and you loved coaching. I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced that. Um, the MMA guys, and I haven't ran across very many of them that aren't just so grateful that you're willing to spend time with them. Whether it's letting them come into one practice or actually being consistent with them, they're all just so grateful for any attention, any time that you'll give them. And they want to learn. Which is good. I mean, I enjoy it. It's one of the Thursdays when I go down. It's the best day of the week for me. And run that wrestling practice. So.
That's awesome. I love it. What about how did you adjust? Like obviously going from college wrestling, like coaching college wrestling to MMA. What kind of technical stuff are you doing a lot differently? Obviously, you throw punches in there. It's a little different than
Yep.
a wrestling match, but still having that base of grappling that helps in an MMA fight.
Yeah,
No, let me tack on one question to that because
Yep.
I think it ties in. And why do college wrestlers make the best MMA fighters in general?
Yeah.
In general.
Yeah, I'll finish off with that one.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it was a lot of learning on the fly, man. Like, I so kind of how I got into it, just kind of brief story here. With my history with Gaethje. After Gaethje lost his second fight in the UFC to Poirier, I was in Oregon on vacation watching it on TV, and I just saw a guy who has an amazing wrestling background just completely abandon his wrestling. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I could tell it wasn't even in his back pocket. Like it wasn't even an option. Like he had
Mm.
just completely ignored it and wasn't going to go there. So I called him that next week. I called him, said, "Hey man, like let's go out to lunch. Just want to chat." And it was after that fight that he did an interview, and he's like, "I don't really care about being the champion. I just want to be an exciting fighter, put on, you know, great fights and make a lot of money." And
I
I
remember that.
I took him to lunch that, it was probably that next Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever. And I just called him out. I was like, "I think you're full of shit." I was like, "Nobody does this just for fun." I was like, if you're not in it to try and win the belt and, be successful, then you should stop. I said, because it's dumb. And I said, and beyond that, I was like, you've completely abandoned your wrestling. You don't even think about it. I was like, if you took Poirier down one time per round in that fight, you win that fight. Because Poirier would take a leg kick and come in high with punches, just trying to close space. And it's like if you just change level and take him down, you win the fight. And so I said, I'm willing to get back in the room with you. I think it's important that you at least put a little focus on it so that if you need it, it's there. I said, I don't expect anything from you. I just want to see you reach your goals and reach your potential. And, I said, so just putting it out there. If it's important to you, then, I'm willing to do that. And he called me about an hour later, said, let's go. And then, I've been on the ride since then, and, so that was kind of how I got into it, and obviously things have evolved and I've been able to pick up some amazing guys like Kamaru and Archie through that process. But yeah, early it was a lot of learning on the fly, man. Watching fights and kind of putting myself in these positions and figuring out what I would do. As a wrestler, how would I adapt to this situation? And yeah, just going in the room and trying it. And fortunately, I'm a very visual guy. Like I can watch something and learn. I don't have to necessarily go out and do it. I can just see it and learn it. That was one of the attributes I had as a wrestler that I thought, was good. So I've tried to take that into the fighting and just be like, I think this will work really well here. and you try it out. It's like experimentation. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And then you got the jujitsu factor that's like, okay, that was a really bad idea. Close my, but
Jiu-jitsu factor.
yeah, because a lot of times what we do as wrestlers is not the right thing when you're going up against a grappler who
Get your head caught on the way down.
caught your ankle caught,
For
all
sure.
kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's been probably one of the most fun parts for me is, learning how to adapt my wrestling into this fight world and be effective and, and really bring value to these fighters,
Yeah.
Heck
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wait, I need to answer to my question now.
You got to remind me what your question was, Max.
Why do college wrestlers make such good fighters?
Oh, yeah. I think there's a lot of factors. I think the biggest one is mindset and ability to work, right? Ability to work and grind through adversity. Trevor Whitman, obviously fortunate to get to work with one of the greatest minds in MMA that there ever has been. And Trevor will tell you all day long that wrestlers are his favorite guys to coach, and the biggest one is they just mentally, they're just stronger than damn near every athlete that steps into the cage, or, if they come from a different background, wrestlers just inherently are stronger mentally. They're stronger physically a lot of times, and they have better power. You'll hear every coach will tell you that the wrestlers have better power. And I think that's from a lifetime of learning how to use their hips, whereas that's not necessarily a focus in a lot of other disciplines. So I think, and then everybody knows a wrestler can dictate where the fight goes.
Yeah.
If they want to use a wrestling, they can dictate where it goes. And that's a huge thing.
Absolutely. What do you think about, BJJ is like kind of super popular now for, weekend warriors that, they turn 25 and they want to do something active and it's like a fun sport, and you can somewhat pick it up and be, proficient at a later age. But you ever watch a wrestler that starts at 25, 30, like they just never have the mechanics down? Why do you think that is? Why do you think like wrestling is almost something you got to start when you're young?
Such a good question.
I think the fundamentals of wrestling are hard, and they get harder as you get older. Just the ability to maintain a wrestling stance. I mean, just that alone, as you get older, and you get muscle imbalances. You stop working out. You're sitting in a desk chair. Your back starts to hurt. There's a lot of factors. I just think wrestling, and you'll hear everybody say it. You'll hear every fighter, everyone say that wrestling is the hardest thing that they do. It's their least favorite training day of the week. So to take something like that everybody knows is one of the hardest things you can do, and turn that into a commercial like Pilates endeavor. I just don't think it's feasible. And then jujitsu, you don't have somebody pulling on your head, right? Trying to maintain a good stance, maintain good position, and somebody's pulling on your head, right? There's no way to bail out of that. Whereas jujitsu, you can go to your back.
Yeah.
And people live on their back there. And it's just the physicality of it is so much different. The output in terms of effort and the mental output is so much different. I think jujitsu is like a it's a chess match with less like physical output. Wrestling's a chess match with a tremendous amount of physical output. And I just don't think that the normal average person can handle it if it hasn't been ingrained into them for years and years.
Yeah.
And that is also probably answers why wrestlers are mentally tough.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're Joe Rogan. I love when Joe Rogan talks about wrestling. Guys they're absolutely crazy. The things that we do. I mean, you go down to just having to roll mats up and roll them, roll mats out and roll them up. Like no one else has to do that stuff.
It sucks.
You can go down to the little things that wrestlers do that just nobody else has to do in any other sport. Just facts.
I think it's funny too, though. It's almost the reason why I think wrestling will never be like a football. Like you'll never get the popularity because it's just not for everybody. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Hard things are not popular.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
I always tell people wrestling's awesome. Makes you uglier. It's really hard. You can get herpes. It's pretty cool.
Laundry list of awesome things.
Yeah.
You throw that in there, man. I just think it's not fun. It's rewarding. Like, you got to be a little sick in the head to like it. Like you get done and you're in the middle of it. You want to die. And then once you're done, you're like, all right, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah. No, I think to us, you guys were just hanging out with Josh, last couple of weeks. I think CrossFit's very similar. There's a handful of sports that I've participated in that I would compare to wrestling. And they're popular in their own little bubbles, but outside of their bubbles, they're not that popular. Mountain biking is one of them, like cross country mountain biking. I raced a couple seasons and just, local races, and it's freaking hard. And the guys that do it, the gals that do it, they have the same mentality as wrestlers. They're a little bit crazy.
It's tough.
And CrossFit's similar to that. Like you're just freaking moving weight and having to hustle, and it's like, why would I want to do this for fun?
Yeah.
That is such a good.
So true.
Yeah, Ben. What about? Did you know you were going to go into coaching? Because obviously you got to just spending time with you, and like in 2022, especially, like I felt like you didn't know me, and you helped me out a bunch. COVID shut everything down, and anytime I shot you a text, shot you a call, you're like, yeah, let's wrestle, and just like your genuine, I don't know, love and just like servant leadership came through, and you see it with all the guys you're working with now, and how much you put in there. You said it earlier, like Thursday is your favorite day. Was this something you always knew you wanted to do? And also just like, thank you for everything you've done. Like 2020 was such a blast, and I don't know what I would have done without you guys, and not really having a training situation back home while everything was shut down, with the whole world.
Yeah. I think it is something I always wanted to do. Both my parents were coaches. So I was around coaches my whole life, and I think you look back. Anybody looks back on their career if they were in something long enough and achieved things they wanted to achieve. You can look back and attribute it to a line of coaches. From the time you were a youth athlete up through whenever you stopped, right? And those coaches all had a certain impact on you, whether it be good or bad. And I fortunate for me, I had a lot of coaches that had really amazing impacts on me, starting with my dad. And then, there's a laundry list of guys that I couldn't remember them all, if I had to name them off. But, a lot of people had an impact on my life. And because of that impact, because of the opportunities, because of the time, I've been able to be successful and really live my dreams out. And I think that I wanted to be able to give that back, and there's something fun. There's something fun about seeing someone else achieve their goals and putting time into somebody and watching them succeed. It's to me, it's more fulfilling than winning on my own, or anything that I ever did. I remember when Gaethje All-American at UNC, that was the first one since like the 70s. That feeling was tenfold what it was when I won the national title.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So I just think I think it is something I always wanted to do, and it's something that I just really, really enjoy. I'm probably the worst businessman in the world. I don't ask for money from any of these guys I coach, never have. I do it out of pure enjoyment, and that's just that's the honest truth. So
that's really cool. I think it's such a special, like, I don't know, it's cool. We're all coaching at Mile High right now too. It's like we're all in our different locations, but I fell into coaching on accident, and it's such a rewarding, like, I don't know. It's amazing when you see your guys, like, it's a different sense of pride when you see your guys do something after, working with them forever, and how much, they sacrifice for that. And then they go out there and actually do the thing. It's such a cool thing. And I don't know. That's amazing. I love it.
Iron Summit is brought to you by Bridge Athletic. Looking for a way to streamline your training programs and deliver exceptional results? Check out our friends at Bridge Athletic. Their platform is packed with over 300 templates and 1,500 instructional videos, courtesy of subject matter experts like Exos, FMS, and Hyperice, making program design both efficient and impactful. Our listeners can take advantage of an exclusive offer. For a limited time, get your first 30 days free and your next month at 50% off when you use code Iron Summit, all caps. That's code Iron Summit, no spaces, all caps, for 30 days free plus 50% off your second month at bridgeathletic.com. Check it out and start assigning custom programs directly to your athlete's mobile device.
Yeah. There's nothing like it, man. I mean, there really isn't. There's a lot of ups and downs, but a lot of opportunity to make impact on kids that need good mentors. And I think today's society, with the outside influences, the social media, the things these kids are seeing, it's even more important for guys like us to put our hands on these kids and mold them, or at least be a small part of it.
Yeah,
So.
For sure. No, it's so true. And I think another thing I've always appreciated about you, Ben, is you're just a true student of the sport. I think you can tell also when you talk about MMA. It's the same way. It's something I learned from you probably back in high school, is like, you can study wrestling like you can study, your math textbook.
Yeah.
Like you can learn this stuff and get better at it by, watching it, paying attention to film, spending a lot of time with it, watching the guys you want to wrestle like, and then taking that and trying to implement it, and really truly being a student of the technical side of things. Because it's easy to just try and go out there and go as hard as you can, but that'll only get you so far.
Yeah, no, and I think, unfortunately, I think too many people realize that after their careers are over. I mean, I heard you say it, Ryan, in your podcast with Josh, I think, that you're a better wrestler now than, or maybe it was at your workout or whatever. But, that's the truth, man. When you get into the coaching world, if you want to do a good job, you have to be a student of the sport, because you've got a bunch of different body styles. You got a bunch of different wrestling styles. Not everything's going to work for everybody, and not everything you did is going to work for everybody, So you have to get outside your comfort zone as a coach. You got to learn. You got to, break things down, and if you do a good job of that, you're going to have kids. You're going to have kids adapt and be successful.
Yeah. I think it's such a skill. It's so interesting, having to meet kids where they're at, or meet, men where they're at, and understanding, the big levers for them and what motivates them. Because everybody's so different and has such different needs and is motivated differently. I think it was a cool experience, coaching in college for a couple of years and kind of seeing how different athletes respond to different things, and, having to adjust your approach, and, you can't do the same thing. Like, one thing might work well for you and it wouldn't work well for Max, or vice versa. And, I think that's something that's such a good skill that you develop over years and years and years of doing it.
Yeah, 100%. And in turn, you get to become a better wrestler. That's the fun part.
Right when it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I guess what's been probably most fun for me from that standpoint is the sport is just slowed down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you get in, and even when I wrestle with high level guys now, that my body can't do what it used to do, right? So the timing, the reaction's a little slower, but like from a mental standpoint, like, you can feel everything that's going to happen. You can see it before it happens, it just, whereas when you're in the thick of it as a competitor, it's just, everything's happening real time, and it just,
so true.
For whatever reason, the sport slows way down once you start coaching and breaking it down,
That's what everyone mistakes for old man strength. It's just better timing,
Wisdom.
Better understanding. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's true. Except for when I had to wrestle Deacon during that COVID. My body's still paying for that.
I still use some of that, Ben, that like crackdown, rolling up on that, grabbing that elbow and rolling up, putting them in danger. I love it. I still show that at camps.
Yeah. It's the best, man.
That's good stuff, man.
That was the Brian Stith killer, the Pac-10 finals.
Let's go. No, I think the other thing too, as you get older, which is part of the reason wrestling is a good sport, is like all the pressure, but it's so easy to see, like, once you get out of it, you're like, oh, it's not as big of a deal as you think it is. But when you're in the moment, like, everything's this huge deal. And when there's no pressure, I feel like you can explore the sport from like a student aspect instead of just like, oh crap, hopefully I don't lose this next match. That's 5 days out, you know?
Yeah, and I think what you just said kind of um, is a part of this new mentality we're seeing in
Mindset.
wrestling,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Is so many more of these kids are becoming students of the sport early. They're not just taking information in from a coach and just doing it, right? It's like they're spending time, and I would give credit to sites like Flow Wrestling, right? The access
For
to
sure.
technique and matches is so much greater than it used to be. I mean, you'd have to seek stuff out and dig to find good matches, or maybe your coaches had VHS tapes sitting in their office, of
Yeah.
Yeah.
stuff from the past. But yeah, these kids are. I mean, the level of wrestling's gone through the roof. The enjoyment, and I think the pressure is not the same for these kids now as it was for like in my era and probably even your guys' era to some extent.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's because of that. It's like these kids are learning. It's like I want to go try this. I want to get out and compete because I've watched all this. I've learned. I've working on it, and let's go do it.
Well,
Yeah,
also
exactly.
when you're in the middle of a small town and you got a Ben Cherrington as your head coach, like there's some phenomenal club coaches out there that are helping with that too. I think.
That-
But what do you think about? I had a coach tell me this once. He's like, I think you get about 10 hard years on your body competing in wrestling, and so if you start that clock when you're 12 versus when you're 16,
Yep.
these kids bottom out sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or do you think that's kind of like not the
I,
case?
I do. I do. Coach Owens used to speak to that, and he
Yeah.
thought you had five like really high level years, where 10 years at a high level, but 5 like at the peak. And
Yeah.
and you obviously there's anomalies to that. A Jordan Burroughs would be one of those. A Kyle Snyder, guys who just keep going and going. Um, but yeah, I think time's going to tell right now with this, with what's happening
This
at the
current
youth level.
generation. Yeah.
Mm.
These high school kids coming in beating college kids.
Yeah, and really match counts. I mean, I don't prescribe to what's happening right now. I think like the RMN stuff. There's so many of those type of things out there where kids are wrestling from September to August.
Yeah, that's
Without a
crazy.
break, right? And they're wrestling 300 plus matches a year. Um, I think time's going to tell. My personal belief is that we're going to see a lot of kids wash out at the most important times, at the biggest points in their career because they can't maintain it or they're just done.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong, but yeah, the human body can only take so much, and when you're getting 300 matches as an 8-year-old,
Yeah.
and it continues until you get through high school, like I just don't know how it's feasible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost to the point where, I see a kid that's 12 that's all world right now. And I'm like, at a camp, I'll even like dad's like, what do you think? And I'm like, be careful. Like help your kid enjoy the sport. It's like a marathon. It's not a sprint to win, middle
Yep.
school state.
Yeah, and I've seen too many high level wrestlers start when they were sophomores in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Like there's just everybody's got their time, and it doesn't have to be when they're 10 years old, 12 years old, But I
Yeah.
also think that because of the visibility of the sport and social media, I think that there's too many parents that are trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
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 Feel like they can't miss a weekend because so and so's at
Going.
this
Yeah.
tournament and they're going to post about it, and and I better be there too.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge problem right now.
If I could have my like perfect scenario or tell a parent what to do or what I would do with my kids is have them be on the mat, have fun with wrestling, but not compete until they're 12, 13 years old,
Yep.
and then flip that switch. So really it's not like there's no pressure associated with it. It's for fun, purely like you're being a student of the sport. You're not trying to win anything.
Yep.
Then turn that on so you're ready for high school.
Absolutely.
I think that
that's
would
a
be the way
European
I'd do
mindset.
it.
Yeah. Like the
Well,
Russians, I think that's what they do to some extent.
and the truth is, no one really cares. No one cares at all what you did in middle school.
No.
No one really cares what you did. Like if your goal is to wrestle in college, no one really cares what you did in high school either. Like,
No.
it's to go like, what
I
do you
mean-
do in college? And if your goal is to wrestle internationally, no one really cares what you did in college. So it's like,
No.
you
And,
can
and
just,
in the grand scheme of things, like outside of the people that know what you did, when it's all said and done, nobody cares about that either.
Yeah.
it's true.
You know what I mean?
We're wrestlers at the end of the day. Yeah.
I mean, it may give you accomplish something at a high level. It may give you some opportunities here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true.
For the love of the
100%.
game.
Yeah, it's for the love of
That's
the game.
what's awesome about wrestling.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Well, that's
Awesome.
I think that's such a great great spot to wrap it, Ben. Is there anything else you got, or anything? Where can people find you? You know, if they're looking for a house, what's a good way to contact you?
yeah, cohomeadvisor.com is my website, and or you can catch me on Instagram. I don't even know what my handle is, but
We'll link it. We'll link it below.
Find it.
Good
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm here. Need to buy a house. Need some coaching advice. I'm all about it. So
Awesome.
appreciate you
Thanks,
guys having me on.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. You're the man. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you for everything.
All right. You bet, fellas. Have a good one.
Mm.